We're used to films getting delayed. Maybe a key actor was injured, or the visual effects weren't ready, or test audiences hated the first cut. These things happen. But what if a movie was already done, locked, scored, ready to ship, and then it just never came out? No warning, no press release, no explanation, just silence. In the world of action films, that kind of silence is loud, because a delay without a reason often means someone didn't want the movie to be seen. Whether it was internal politics, uncomfortable truths hidden in the plot, or studio infighting, these are the films that vanished not because they failed, but because they were withheld. Some eventually re-emerged years later, in different formats, often butchered beyond recognition. Others were dropped onto home video with no promotion, no marketing, as if someone wanted to release them while ensuring no one would notice. And nobody ever explained why. No one talks about these delays, no director interviews, no statements from producers. The actors moved on. The fans never knew what happened. And the studios? They acted like the films didn't exist at all. These aren't just forgotten titles. These are questions buried in reels of 35mm film. And today, we're unspooling them. Let's uncover 15 action films that weren't held back by accident. They were delayed, for reasons no one ever dared to explain. Fact, Shabak Wahed. Excessive force the Thed. Force on force. Elif watis'amia wa khamsa wa tis'un. It had a script, a finished shoot, a lead actress trained in action choreography. By all accounts, Excessive Force 2 should have arrived in 1993, capitalizing on the original film's modest success and tapping into a rising appetite for female-led revenge thrillers. Instead, it was shelved for nearly 2 years. When it finally emerged in 1995, it was released with zero build-up, no press screenings, no TV spots, just a quiet drop onto the video market. It almost felt like an afterthought. So, what went wrong? Some reports suggest studio hesitation. The tonal shift switching from a male lead to a female protagonist might have scared off conservative distributors. Others claim early edits didn't land well with executives who expected more explosions, less emotion. Regardless of the reason, Excessive Force 2 never stood a chance. Not because of the film itself, but because the people behind it let it rot in silence. It wasn't a failure. It was erased before it had the opportunity. Fact #2. The Forgotten One. 1989. It's rare for a film to live up to its title quite so literally. The Forgotten One was completed in 1987, starring Terry O'Quinn in the wake of his chilling role in The Stepfather. A gothic thriller with eerie undertones, it had everything ready. Footage, music, distribution, then it vanished. For 2 years, not a word. No updates, no reshoots, no controversy. The film simply didn't come out until 1989, when it slipped quietly onto home video without ceremony or attention. No one in the production has ever explained the gap. O'Quinn continued his career. Director Philip Badger vanished from the industry. And the studio? They never mentioned the project again. Speculation has filled the void. Some point to shifts in marketing priorities. Others suspect the supernatural themes made it a tough sell in a conservative climate. But in truth, no one knows. It's as if someone pressed pause and never told the world why. When The Forgotten One finally surfaced, it was already dated, missed its cultural window. Maybe that was the plan all along. Maybe someone wanted it forgotten. Fact. #3 Quiet Cool. 1986. In a decade overflowing with explosive cop thrillers, Quiet Cool had the right ingredients. A hard-edged NYPD detective, drug war violence, and gritty shootouts in remote woodlands. James Remar led the charge. The movie was finished and ready for release, but it never got one. No red carpet, no ads, no press junket. It was as if the studio got cold feet at the last second. The film arrived unannounced on VHS shelves. Absent of fanfare, stripped of the momentum it was built to ride. Insiders whisper that early screenings didn't go well. Others claim the violence hit too close to real-world concerns. But there's no concrete evidence, no formal statement, only the absence of one. Some posters were printed, some trailers cut, but most audiences never even knew it existed. And that seems to have been the goal. Quiet Cool wasn't shelved due to scandal. It simply became a ghost, disappearing quietly into the margins of action cinema, where it still sits today. Act #4 Chain of Command. 1994. Michael Dudikoff had carved out a space as a go-to name in American martial arts cinema. Chain of Command looked like another vehicle built for his brand. Covert missions, desert warfare, and geopolitical stakes. Shot in 1993, it was scheduled for a 1994 release, but release plans stalled. There was no buzz, no premiere. The film arrived late and only on VHS with no real rollout. For a fully finished project, the delay was noticeable and unexplained. What happened? Some cite changes at the production company. Others point to its politically charged narrative, oil corruption, international arms deals, and rogue agents operating in unstable regions. Too timely? Too inconvenient? Whatever the reason, Chain of Command became a textbook case of quiet suppression. It didn't vanish completely, but it certainly didn't get the spotlight it was meant to have. And to this day, no one stepped forward to say why. Fact #5 Rage and Honor, 1992. Cynthia Rothrock and Richard Norton brought martial arts pedigree and global fan bases to the table. Rage and Honor had completed production in 1991, and anticipation was building. But what followed wasn't a release. It was a murky sequence of partial unveilings. The film launched first in select international territories, some with different edits and altered sequences. The US version arrived months later, creating confusion among fans, comparing scenes and endings. Why the delay? No one said. There were whispers of censorship scenes depicting excessive brutality or controversial portrayals of law enforcement. Some speculate that competing distribution rights caused a behind-the-scenes battle over final cut approval. Whatever the cause, the movie fragmented. By the time most viewers got to see it, the sequel was already in motion. Rage and Honor wasn't just released late, it was released inconsistently, and it never fully recovered from that split identity. Fact #6 Red Scorpion, 1994. The first Red Scorpion had all the makings of a Cold War cult classic. Its sequel, however, took a different path, one of rebranding, redirection, and near-total invisibility. Filmed in 1993 with Matt McComb stepping into the action lead role, Red Scorpion 2 was designed to reinvigorate the franchise. But instead of building on its name recognition, the sequel was delayed, then released with minimal connection to the original. No consistent posters, no theatrical plans, and when it did show up on video in 1994, it carried all the signs of post-production confusion, tonal inconsistencies, erratic pacing, and a forgettable final cut. Some insiders say the film's dual identity caught between camp and realism sparked internal debate. Others point to shifting ownership, which blurred the lines between what was canon and what was salvageable. In the end, Red Scorpion 2 wasn't killed by bad reviews. It was quietly stripped of momentum by indecision and dropped before anyone could care. Fact #7 American Samurai, 1992. Two martial arts stars, one underground deathmatch. American Samurai had all the ingredients to capitalize on the post-Bloodsport boom. With David Bradley facing off against Mark Dacascos, the film wrapped in 1991 and was poised to make waves in both the US and overseas markets. But then, the US release didn't happen. While the film quietly slipped into home video circuits in Europe and Asia, American audiences were left waiting. It didn't arrive stateside until months later, buried on VHS racks with no promotional campaign and a suspiciously altered final cut. Gone were some of the stylized fight scenes teased in early clips. The tone had shifted. Even the bloodiest moments seemed trimmed. Theories spread quickly. Was it the violence? A conflict between producers? Or did early versions strike too close to the nerve of what underground combat films were glamorizing? No one confirmed. No one denied. In the end, American Samurai felt like a film caught between eras, one that showed up too late to matter, and too early to be appreciated. Fact #8 Back in Action, 1993. Roddy Piper and Billy Blanks were an unlikely but compelling duo. Back in Action paired their raw intensity with a gritty urban war setting, and production moved swiftly in 1992. The plan was simple. Ride the buddy cop wave into the mid-90 seconds with a hard-hitting twist. But the film didn't make that wave. It sat idle. Rumors of delayed editing, reshoots, and internal clashes surfaced. By the time the movie finally arrived, it had been heavily cut. Several action scenes were shortened or missing entirely. Dialogue was redubbed. And the musical score? Replaced. What was once a lean, violent street thriller had become a neutered, forgettable direct-to-video release. Insiders claimed the studio panicked, concerned that the brutal hand-to-hand combat and anti-authority themes might turn off distributors. Rather than take a risk, they chose the quieter route: silence, delay, and a softened product. The result? A film that promised fists but was released with a whimper. Fact Shabak Night Hunter, 1996. Take a veteran martial artist. Add vampires. Mix in supernatural lore and dark city streets. Night Hunter, starring Don the Dragon Wilson, was wrapped and ready by 1994, a unique genre crossover with serious cult potential. But the audience didn't see it until nearly 2 years later. The delay wasn't announced. There were no changes in cast or crew, just a gap, unspoken, during which the film lingered in obscurity. Some blame the delay on distributors who didn't know how to market it. Was it horror? Action? Comedy? It defied traditional labels. Others suggest financial limbo ownership changes or stalled licensing deals. Whatever the truth, Night Hunter was a victim of timing and uncertainty. By the time it appeared, the vampire craze had waned. The action market had shifted, and a strange, ambitious little film that could have stood out got lost in the shuffle. Fact Hasson Zero Live Wire, 1992. You'd think a film starring Pierce Brosnan just a few years before his Bond breakout would be primed for the spotlight. Live Wire had all the elements: government conspiracies, experimental explosives, and a political thriller edge. It was shot, edited, and prepared for a traditional theatrical rollout. That never happened. Instead, it was quietly aired on HBO, then shuffled to video release like a piece of excess inventory. Brosnan's name barely appeared in promotional material. The trailers were scarce. The timing felt suspicious. The film's premise? A terrorist weapon that turns drinking water into an explosive device. And not long before its scheduled release, real-world scares about water contamination were making headlines across the U.S. Some say HBO feared backlash. Others believe the film's terror plot hit too close to the anxieties of early 90 Seconds America. But there was no press statement, no postponement notice, just a complete pivot. And that pivot erased any chance Live Wire had of making noise. What should have been a bold theatrical action film became an invisible blip. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in a story is timing. Fact Shabak Wahid Virtual Combat, 1995. Long before virtual reality was a buzzword, Virtual Combat imagined avatars escaping into the physical world. Don the Dragon Wilson led the charge in a neon-drenched cyber thriller that was meant to ride the sci-fi wave into the mid-90 seconds. But after wrapping in 1994, the movie went quiet. Instead of hitting U.S. shelves first, it trickled out in Europe and Asia. The North American release didn't land until a year later, and by then, it already felt dated. The promise of cutting-edge visuals had aged overnight. Insiders said the studio balked at the post-production results. The digital effects, bold in concept, were no longer convincing by the time the film was ready. Others said no one could figure out how to sell it too sci-fi for action fans, too violent for mainstream science fiction. The final product limped into stores with a bland cover and no fanfare. A vision of the future that arrived late and limped in quietly through the back door. Fact Hasson 2. The Expert, 1995. Jeff Speakman had built a name on brutal, no-frills martial arts films. The Expert was supposed to be different, darker, more psychological, set inside a maximum security prison. It was shot in 1994 and originally cut as a revenge drama with philosophical undertones. But what emerged in 1995 was something else entirely. The final version was choppy, over-edited, and padded with generic action. Key scenes were missing. Dialogue was overdubbed. Even the score had been replaced. The tone had shifted from grim to generic. What happened? Some say Speakman clashed with producers over the direction. He wanted a serious, character-driven story. The studio wanted more punches per minute. That conflict led to recuts, possibly even by different editors. No one ever released the original cut. No alternate version leaked. The Expert faded into the direct-to-video void, leaving fans wondering what might have been. A film meant to show a new side of its star, reduced to an echo of what it aimed for. Fact Shabak Wahid Street Night, 1993. By 1992, Jeff Speakman was poised to break out of B-movie territory. Street Night was a step up, a Warner Brothers project, Urban setting, stylish fight choreography. The production wrapped smoothly. Trailers were prepped and then silence. Theatrical release? Minimal. Marketing? Non-existent. The movie landed in theaters quietly and disappeared even faster. No major rollout, no press circuit, a studio film that behaved like an orphan. Why? Some believe the timing was catastrophic. Just months before its planned release, the 1,992 liters A riots erupted. Suddenly, a movie about gang wars, corrupt cops, and violent street justice wasn't just fiction, it was gasoline on open flames. Rather than pull it entirely, the studio seems to have opted for quiet damage control, a soft, quiet release to fulfill contracts, and then move on. Street Night wasn't buried because it was broken. It was buried because it was too real at the wrong time. Fact Hashon for The Silencer, 1992. You've probably never heard of The Silencer. That's not by accident. Starring Lynette Walden and Jack Scalia, the film was shot in 1990 with a slick premise. A female assassin working deep inside political power structures. Completed on schedule, the film was held for nearly 2 years, then pushed to video with a mismatched title and vague marketing. Gone were the edgy visuals teased in production stills. Whole subplots vanished. Dialogue was changed. Even the box art looked like it belonged to a different film. Insiders have long whispered about legal threats, real-world political parallels, or pressure from financiers who wanted the edgier content cut. But no confirmation ever came. The director never spoke about it again. The irony? A film about silencing threats was itself silenced. Fact Shabak Wahda Khamsa. Project Shadow Chaser 3. Elf wa Tis'umia wa Khamsa wa Tis'un. It was supposed to be the next chapter in a low-budget but ambitious sci-fi action saga. Directed by Sam Furstenberg, Project Shadow Chaser 3 finished shooting in 1993 with all the trappings of a mid-90 seconds cult sequel. Androids, explosions, military conspiracies. But when the film finally arrived in 1995, it had been stripped of identity. Different regions got different versions, posters changed. Some viewers never realized it was part of a trilogy. Release dates were inconsistent. Marketing was non-existent. Even the title fluctuated in international releases, sometimes referred to without a number at all. No official reason was ever given. No cast interviews. No follow-up clarification. The only thing consistent about Shadow Chaser 3 was how confusing its existence had become. It wasn't just delayed. It was destabilized, eroded by studio apathy until no one could trace where, when, or why it came out. Bonus fact. The Order, 2001. At a glance, The Order seems like another globe-trotting Jean-Claude Van Damme flick, ancient prophecies, secret societies, a race against time across Jerusalem. It wrapped production in 1999, complete with early trailers and advance posters. Then, everything stopped. The film missed its release window. No updated schedule, no explanation. It reappeared more than a year later, re-edited, rebranded, and barely resembling what was first teased. Fans noticed quickly. Scenes shown in the trailer were nowhere to be found. Tonal shifts were obvious. Fight choreography had changed. Entire subplots? Gone. What happened? Some say Van Damme clashed with the producers over control. Others whisper that religious imagery in the original cut was deemed too controversial by international distributors. A few insiders even suggest that the film was quietly reshot without ever announcing the changes publicly. But no official cut of the first version has ever surfaced. No director's commentary. No acknowledgement of a rework. The Order became something more than just a film. It became two competing realities. One that was promised, and one that was delivered. And the one that disappeared? Still buried. In a film about sacred secrets and forbidden texts, the biggest mystery is what happened behind the camera. Some films vanish for obvious reasons. These didn't. They were finished, packaged, and ready for release, then pulled into the shadows without explanation. No scandals, no lawsuits, just a quiet retreat into obscurity. So we'll ask again, were these delays just bad timing or intentional disappearances? Which title do you think was buried on purpose? And more importantly, what other action films are still sitting in a vault somewhere, waiting for someone to ask why they were never released? The stories don't end with what we've seen. Sometimes, they begin with what we haven't.